Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Shifting the Business Infrastructure, HR Resources, and Hot Topics to Keep Your Organization Compliant, presented by Ray & Associates, a top 100 regional CPA and business consulting firm with offices across Ohio. My name is Imani Fields, and I'll be moderating today's presentation. Before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items to cover. If you have any questions during today's presentation, you may enter them into the chat box on your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as we can at the conclusion of today's presentation. However, to be respectful of your time, we know that we will not be able to get to them all. Therefore, following today's webinar, we will review all questions and send out the answers via email as soon as we can. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's slides, they'll be available in the handout section of the webinar dashboard on your computer screen. Today's webinar will be given by Renee West. Renee, a senior manager and leader of the Ray & Associates HR consulting practice, has more than 27 years of experience in human resources. Renee specializes in assisting organizations within the manufacturing, nonprofit, contingent staffing, food, and other industries with their HR challenges. She is also currently serving on the Ohio Society for Human Resources Management Board of Directors as Central District Director. Today, Renee will hone in on top HR challenges businesses are facing, and I am going to pass it on to you, Renee.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We know everyone is busy, and we appreciate your time in joining us for this conversation. My name, again, is Renee West, and I am currently the senior manager here at Ray & Associates, and we have a lot of great information to share with you today. And next slide, please. We'll move right on. So today, as we move through our discussion, we have a lot of information to cover, and we will also be providing resources for you as takeaway items for future research. One of the first items we'll talk about today is the ever updating the stimulus package. As we know, we're still waiting for some final decisions, but there's been some movement on that in relationship to unemployment benefits. We'll also touch base on COVID-19 and the continued FFCRA leaves, and talk through some Department of Labor facts that have been updated to help employers for certain scenarios. And we'll also talk through the updates to the Civil Rights Act and Title VII, which will prompt companies and HR individuals to ensure that we have updated handbooks, and we'll talk through protected classes, and also talk about what employee training your organization should have. And as we mentioned, employee handbooks, we'll touch base on those as well. And we'll talk about employee recruitment and retention. Employers now are concerned with, if we need to hire, how do we do that? And how do we retain who we currently have as workers? And another important topic is employee mental health. So we'll share some resources on that as well. Next slide, please. And as we talked about, we'll share recommendations and resources as well. Next slide. So let's get started and talk about updates to the stimulus package. I'm sure everyone is aware that President signed executive orders this past Saturday to extend federal unemployment weekly benefit. Currently, right now, that federal supplemental benefit is set at $600 weekly, and the projection is for this to go down to $400 weekly. And another provision of this will be that $300 of that total weekly wage will be paid by the federal government, and then they're reaching out to each individual state to pay that additional $100. That's definitely causing some concern from a statewide level, as many states are pretty much out of money from an unemployment perspective. So again, there'll be continued details moving forward on that. Also looking at a payroll tax deferral until the end of 2020. Student loan payments deferred until December 31st, and eviction protection is also part of that. Please note this is subject to change and will continue to move forward. I know that the Congress is meeting and looking at possibly changing or making recommendations to this. So this is a very fluid situation, but definitely the unemployment was the biggest piece of that, as a lot of American workers are looking at that information and wondering where that stands. So as we have more information on that, we will be updating our Ray COVID website So please refer back to that as we move through the next couple days. Next slide, please. As we look at, and as we've been talking to companies and recruitment and retention, obviously companies want to retain and recruit individuals as they start to open up. We do want to share some unemployment stats with you that just came from the Department of Labor. Reported 1.2 million US workers filed for new unemployment benefits during the first week of August, which is a decrease of 249,000 from the previous week. That is definitely great news. The total number of workers continuing to claim unemployment benefits fell to 16 million last week after nearly a peak of 25 million in early May. And another 13 million people continue to claim unemployment under the new pandemic unemployment, which provides jobless benefits to those that would not necessarily be eligible for the original unemployment. So these are good numbers to see. I mean, obviously there are still thousands of people that are out of work. And one of the biggest pieces that we want to share is that there is an improvement, which is a good thing. I think we need to focus on some of the positives as well as we've moved through these past few months. So this actually brings us to our very first poll question. We'd like to get your thoughts on, has your organization been challenged with recalling workers back from unemployment? Those that you might have called that had been on layoff and you're ready to bring them back. Have you had any challenges with that? Yes or no? Thank you for voting. We'll give it a few more minutes here and see the results. Has your organization been challenged with calling back workers from unemployment? I am so excited to see that that is 82% say no. So that is a great thing. I know earlier on here a few months ago, very challenging for companies to try to recall workers, especially given that they had the additional $600, supplemental benefit. So it's good to see that organizations are able to recall those workers and retain those workers. That is definitely, very important for their growth and for, the growth of the organization as well. Great. So as we talk about retention, I've talked with a number of clients and colleagues over, the past few months, and especially the last couple weeks. Companies are really wanting to ensure they retain the workers that they have. They've been the workers that have got through this, pandemic, have been on the front lines working. And once the job market starts to improve out there, they want to ensure that their employees stay. And that's definitely a big cause for concern. So some best practices that we can share with you is, number one, show employees empathy and compassion. Listen to their concerns and be flexible. As you know, we've all been going through a lot of challenges over the past few months, and there's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's still even more uncertainty moving forward. So companies taking the time to care about their employees will make them feel a part of the organization and help with that retention. Another option to help retain is provide additional training and upscale skill sets. There are free resources from statewide levels that we can share with you at the end of this presentation that can also provide an opportunity for you to help upscale some of your workers and their skills. If production's not where it needs to be, there's a great opportunity to take that time and really hone in on some skills, do cross-training, allow employees the opportunity to work in different areas. This will definitely help then as well to have a cross-trained staff and can assist you as you continue to grow. And if there's ever another issue, you have some laborers that can work in all different types of areas. One of the biggest pieces too is open, honest, and timely communication with employees. Your employees are expecting to hear from you more than just once a year or more than when there's just an issue. Share with them good news. Share with them the opportunity for them to be a part of a decision or a part of a new project. Being honest and being open and setting timely communication sets the expectation that employees know that you take the time to coordinate the communication. And I know, for example, here at our firm, we have Ray Reminders and Updates that comes out every Friday, and employees know that that is the main means of communication here that can provide you with a lot of information about what's going on. So keep that in mind as you move forward. Next slide, please. Another big change or shift due to the pandemic has been the recruitment process. And I've talked with, again, a number of clients here, especially over the last couple of days of, we are looking to hire individuals, but it's different now. You know, people don't want to come to the office for an interview, or we don't have job fairs we can go to. So what do we need to do as organizations to continue to recruit talent, and how do we do it? So the biggest piece is, you know, looking at your existing process, looking at how your interviewing process goes, and be open to different things. Conduct phone interviews, Skype, as we're doing now with the webinar. Think outside the box of traditional recruitment, and really make it something that you can still give the applicant that interview experience, and share the importance of why you want them to join your organization, and really set your organization apart from others by how you're doing this process. And again, recruiting is different. It's never going to be the same, but there's going to be a lot of different ways and different methods. So from the actual onboarding perspective, that's another piece of recruitment. As you're hiring individuals, that normal onboarding process where you might have them come into the office and meet with 3 or 4 people throughout the course of their day has really pivoted to maybe more of an online remote onboarding process. And that's perfectly fine. It's just important that whatever information you traditionally share with employees during the onboarding process, you still do that, because that's important. And there's ways that you can do everything you've done before. We just need to think a little bit differently. From a recruiting perspective, think about employee referrals. Does your company have an employee referral program where existing employees can help refer individuals into your workplace? Yes, we do not have per se the job fairs, but is there an opportunity to participate in an online job fair? I know the local agencies are looking at ways to pivot how they do that as well to help local employers. So reach out to your Ohio Means Jobs offices as well as a resource. Next slide, please. Actually, if we go back one more, I'm sorry, Amani, can you go back one more slide? Just one more thought as we talk about and we wrap up the recruitment. We are hearing that applicants, when they are going out for interviews, are asking 2 questions, and the top 2 questions that they're starting to ask is, number 1, how did your organization handle the pandemic? And number 2, how did you treat your employees during the pandemic? Employers need to be ready to answer these questions honestly and frankly. So you might think, why is the applicant asking how we handle the pandemic? They want to know how you treat your employees. They want to know the culture of your organization. That's a question for them to know. And when times get tough and get hard, how does your organization react? What do you do? What did you do? So please be prepared as you start to interview that these are 2 questions that we're seeing across the board in all industries that individuals are asking. Okay? Next slide, please. So let's talk about revisiting the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which, as you all know, is the result and part of the CARES Act that was passed earlier this year in response to COVID. And this is just a brief reminder that These leaves, both the emergency and the paid sick leave, are in effect until December 31st, 2020. They're not over. So I talked to some individuals that thought that since people are back to work, that this is no longer in effect. These are in effect until December 31st, 2020. And given as we move forward, they could possibly be extended as well. But it's important for organizations to know, to remain compliant, that this time frame is still in effect. Next slide, please. A couple updates to the FFCRA. These are a couple questions that the Department of Labor has put on their website that have been asked very frequently by employers. And we wanted to share a couple of those because I'm sure a number of you might have the same questions. Next slide, please. The very first one was, do employers have to pay employees for unauthorized telework hours? So if an employee is working at home and they're working unauthorized time, the FLSA states that employers must pay employees for all hours of work actually performed, including overtime work. If the employer knew or had reason to believe the work was performed, they should be paid. This is true even of hours of telework that you did not authorize. So this is very important, and it falls back to the original Department of Labor and the FLSA standards that you pay employees for time that is worked. Okay, next slide, please. Is hazard pay required for employees working through a pandemic? This is a huge question and was really very popular earlier on when essential workers were working through the pandemic and continue to do so. Hazard pay is not required to be paid under federal wage or hour laws. This is additional pay that's usually determined by an organization if they wish to extend that pay to their employees. But there is no law that says employers need to pay. We've seen a number of employers that are paying hazard pay or that have paid hazard pay. We do caution to ensure that employers are consistent in how they're administering this hazard pay to ensure that there is not discrimination. But again, this is something moving forward. Hopefully we do not have any future lockdowns or anything like that, but hazard pays, do come up as we continue to go through, and I'm sure we'll hear more questions as we move forward. Next question, please. Will telemedicine visits count as in-person visits to establish a serious health condition under the FMLA? Telemedicine are such as teledoc. A lot of employees have been utilizing online medicine services due to not being able to go into offices, not being able to travel due to the pandemic. So the answer to that is yes. Through December 31st, the Department of Labor will consider telemedicine visits to be in-person visits to include examination, evaluation, treatment by a healthcare provider. If it's performed by video conference, obviously the doctor needs to be licensed through the appropriate authority, and electronic signatures are accepted on family medical leave forms. This is huge. Those individuals that have worked with family medical leave before know there are a lot of paper requirements, and being able to have electronic signatures and have this defined really will help facilitate those discussions for anyone that's taking family medical leave. Again, keep in mind, this is a serious health condition that is not related to anything that is COVID through the FFCRA leave. The family medical leave regulations are still the same. Those have not changed, but there is a correlation in possibly the pandemic leave moving into family medical leave down the road. So those situations are, of course, something you would want to talk with your legal counsel about as well. Okay, so let's talk about, actually, let's do a poll question. Do you expect employees at your organization to continue requests for FFCRA leaves due to COVID? So yes, no, or not sure. Okay, we'll give everyone a few more minutes here to vote and we'll see the results. Okay, so it looks like we almost have a split between all three. And I expected that. So that, obviously this is something we don't know. Providing the pandemic where it is, where it moves, how it moves forward. Organizations also need to keep in mind, and I'm sure, a lot of them are already doing this. We're looking at the school system, starting back up, students going back into schools and colleges, and how will that impact those employees, possibly that their children are doing remote school, or heaven forbid that the schools were to shut down and children are at home again and families need to balance work and work from home. Keep in mind the FFCRA leave does have a provision for employees to be eligible for leave if they are taking care of a child due to their schools being closed or due to daycares being closed. These will be ongoing situations that we will see as we move through the fall. So, I do expect that, employers will see that leave and those leave requests increase. Also, a best practice in reference to the FFCRA leaves, the current retention law for paperwork and basically for any leave that you're paying to employees needs to be retained for 4 years from the date of the paid leave. This is very crucial for employers to utilize a template to say, check your payroll records to code anyone that's taking COVID-19 time. You will want to ensure, again, these are kept in a separate file and are specifically for any of those leaves for up to that 4-year point. Okay, next slide, please. So there's been a lot of other updates and regulation updates as we've moved through the year. As you know, it's been a very, very busy year. And part of that, we've seen some updates to Title VII and the Civil Rights Update. And Title VII basically applies to employers with 15 or more employees. Title VII prohibits employers from discriminating based on color, national origin, race, religion, or sex. The Supreme Court in July has updated to now include protected classes, including sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. So this is a monumental decision from the Supreme Court and definitely has an impact on employers and your policies. So next slide, please. Let's talk a little bit about what that is. As you know, the employee handbook, as we've talked about numerous times, will now have policies that need to be updated to reflect Title VII and the new protected classes. Any equal opportunity or anti-harassment statements or anywhere that prohibits discrimination should be reviewed. Policies such as non-discrimination and anti-harassment, your dress code policy should also be reviewed. Keeping the wording in these policies to be gender neutral. So no longer using he or she. Looking at your organization's company trainings. Any diversity, equal opportunity, workplace conduct trainings such as your anti-harassment, workplace violence need to be reviewed as well to ensure that that gender neutral wording is utilized. Next slide, please. And we did mention the employment application is another part of that process. On organizations' applications, you should have an EEOC statement that states that employers do not discriminate. That form also needs to be updated to reflect those protected classes. And benefits, looking at your benefits to ensure that they do not discriminate against employees based on the categories as noted in the application. So work with your benefits providers to ensure that the eligibility requirements obviously match the laws and are compliant with those regulations. This definitely impacts hiring practices as well. There's a lot that goes into a hiring practice. Looking at background checks and reference checks. Traditionally, those require an employee to sign a waiver form or sign an authorization form. So if it would require them to divulge any prior information like prior names that would expose them to potential concerns as a transgender, you need to think about that as well. And also ensure that any of your information on your applications and your hiring practices are kept confidential. That's just an HR in me saying that's always the best practice. Another big portion of looking at internal communications and communicating to your employees, ensuring that eliminate wording that assumes transgender roles like he or she, again, is important. And I know this is a lot to think about, but really this impacts almost every portion of recruiting and hiring practices in your organization. Next slide, please. As we talked about the Title VII and also looking at the employee trainings, what employee trainings should organizations have annually? Diversity training, equal opportunity workplace trainings, anti-harassment, including general and sexual harassment, workplace violence, anti-discrimination. These are all trainings that should annually be done and should also be referenced and documented that these have been completed by your organization. Also providing separate trainings to your supervisory and your management staff to also understand the importance and the differences in these types of training. So if they have an employee situation that arises or questions that come out of a matter, that supervisor or manager knows enough that there's an issue and needs to bring it to someone's attention. That's very crucial. And also looking at your workplace rules. Every workplace has them. Every workplace has signs on their bathroom doors. Again, looking at that as ensuring that everything is gender neutral is also a best practice as well. Okay, so let's move to, as we're still talking about compliance, let's look at the employee handbook, which is really the most crucial document that you have for a communication method with your employees. Employers should ensure this is updated annually. Keeping your policies consistent and current with administrations also helps to mitigate risk for employee lawsuits. We are also hearing there have been a tremendous amount of increases in employee lawsuits against employers right now. Everything stemming from discrimination to any other type of legal. There's 3 or 4 different ones that we're starting to see. Workplace violence is another one. So keep in mind that this will continue to escalate, and it's very important that your organization has policies in place to promote workplace safety and those other particular issues. And also provide your employees with resources as to what's expected from them and giving them resources if they have questions. And the employee signature form is the key document that every employer should have for each employee on the handbook. If there's ever an issue or ever a lawsuit, refer back to that handbook, show that employee signature acknowledgement form that they received that handbook and that they understood and were aware of the policies, can definitely help mitigate risk for your organization. So let's talk about what some of those policies should be. Next slide, please. As we talked about, there's been some updates to, obviously, with the pandemic, the FFCRA leaves. Our recommendation is to have these policies obviously done and complete, but keep them separate as an ancillary policy from your employee handbook. We know that, as we talked about before, these leave regulations are in place until the end of December. So keeping that in your handbook would warrant needing to update that if and when that does change. So having this policy done and just separate that you can hand to your employees is definitely helpful for you. Also looking at your family medical leave, as we talked about before. How does that tie into paid time off is a big portion of that. The Americans with Disabilities Act is another one that you want to ensure is updated as well. And as a result of the pandemic, a lot of organizations were caught off guard. Who would have thought we would have dealt with that? But looking at your organization's emergency preparedness plan, what is in place? What policies do you have in place? That a lot of times, once this type of policy is implemented or in place, it can be catered to other emergency times where we might need to have issues. So if there's a fire or something else that, obviously you weren't expecting at your organization, but really being able to look at that pandemic policy and move from there. A big part of emergency preparedness too is just the whole structure from a security standpoint. How does your organization protect the security information that you have as well? Your attendance policies. This is definitely important to ensure you have an attendance policy that is in place, that is current, that provides levels of discipline for certain infractions, and also looking at your paid time off and how that would fall with conjunction with leaves. There was a lot of question and speculation earlier on when the first FFCRA leave regulations came out of, can employees use their vacation time for that? How do they, what is the requirement? And that's still a gray area. But again, looking at your paid time off policy to ensure you have that in there is definitely one you want to look at. Okay, next slide, please. And also looking at your handbook and your safety policies too. And obviously with the new guidelines from the CDC, employers now have requirements to put into place social distancing, mask requirements, specific to industry. And we've given resources at the back of this presentation for each type of organization for workplace posters to have up to ensure that your employees know what the requirements are, where your PPE is located, etc. Workers' compensation is another big portion to ensure that you have that statement in your handbook. All Ohio employers pay into the workers' compensation fund. So there is the ability, again, for compensation through that fund if an individual or employee were to receive a workplace related injury. Accident reporting process is very crucial. How did an accident happen? Who do they report it to? What's the timeline for them to report it? Is another big portion of a safety policy. And bloodborne pathogens as well, those industries that might be healthcare, those that are working, it can be across the board. This deals with infectious diseases and all different parts of that process. So again, safety for your workers is why we want to be sure that these are included. So that takes us to our third poll question of how recently has your employee handbook been updated? Within the past 6 months, within a year, not at all, or you don't have a handbook. Okay, we'll give everybody a few more minutes. Thank you for voting. Okay, so it looks like we have 26% within the past 6 months, 41% within a year, 27% not at all, and 6% don't have a handbook. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. This definitely shows the difference in organizations and where they stand with their handbooks. And again, this is one of the biggest compliance pieces that you can help your organization with. And we tell our clients that we work with a lot of times, your employee handbook does not need to be 50 or 60 pages. It can be compliant and share the mission and the resources of your organization in a smaller format. It's the content that counts versus the size. So please don't feel that that's something that you need to have a huge document for. And we are always happy to help with you in creating that and providing those updates as well. Next slide, please. So it's definitely important for everyone to think about employees' mental health. And a lot of us are going through, a lot of your employees are going through times that they've never gone through before. It's not just one thing maybe that they're concerned about. They're concerned about their financial wellness. They're concerned about their safety. Is it okay for me to go to work? Is my workplace going to keep me safe? Is it okay for me to go to school? Is it okay for my kids to go to school? Job security, that's definitely, with mass layoffs and different organizations, how does that continue to impact a worker's thoughts when they come into work every day and think, oh my gosh, am I going to be next? Or what is that going to look like? Childcare, as we talked about before, when schools open back up, and obviously different, but if the childcare daycare provider closes, how does that employee do childcare? How do they do that? How do you balance working from home and trying to be remote and trying to do everything? Elder care, a lot of employees are also dealing with family members that their parents, their grandparents that they're helping to take care of, and that's also a stressor. And also with the discussions, and there's a lot around equalness for all employees and equity for all employees. So definitely there's a lot that each of us have on our plates each day. And part of what we can do from an employer is, what can we do to help them? And let's talk about that on the next slide. There are resources for employees, and we understand that not all organizations have all of these. These are just options and items for you to consider, and we'll provide resources as well at the end of this. Most organizations or insurance programs have EAP programs or employee assistance programs, and those services can offer employees confidential resources and discussions to help them with pretty much everything we talked about on the previous slide: elder care, financial issues, child care issues, marital issues. Financial is a big part of that too. So there is a lot that these EAP programs can provide. They can provide that ongoing support, and the stigma around, going to ask for help. Now everyone understands the importance of employee mental health, and employers are starting to be more active in providing these resources. Your insurance agencies and your insurance companies also could offer seminars or resources or online resources to your employees to help them on specific topics. So reach out to your insurance brokers for that. Mental health agencies, your local mental health agencies have a lot of information, a lot of resources. They can even come to your organization and have a talk or do a virtual webinar for them. So a lot of options for employers, and the majority of these are all free, which is a good thing. Your local health department, yes, we know they're pretty inundated right now with the COVID issue. However, they are definitely a resource for your employees as well, and they're a resource for you as the employer. If you have issues around COVID or issue around anything health department related, reach out to your local health department as well. And there's plenty of online resources. I always tell everyone, don't just do a Yahoo search to find, an EAP program. Reach out to your colleagues, reach out to, again, the individuals that we mentioned in the resources above. Reach out to us. We are happy to provide you with with some contacts as well. The biggest piece is offering this to your employees. Number one, shows and reinforces that you care. Number two, it helps them, it provides them with avenues to help. You never know what anyone's going through, and they could be going through something very, very trying, that their ability or that time for them to work with one of these agencies could even help save their lives. So it's very, very important. Okay, so let's look at, we've gone through a lot of information, and you're probably wondering, okay, what am I supposed to do first? Definitely from a recommendation standpoint, we have reviewing your current FFCRA policies and leaves for compliance. Please be sure your organizations have the templates needed for these policies. Please be sure your postings are up and that you are compliant in letting your employees know that this is a resource for them if and when they would need to take leave. Review your employee handbook and update policies. That will be ongoing. Even after the pandemic, there's always going to be updates, and an annual review is definitely recommended. Be sure you complete your employee trainings and that you document it. Obviously now a lot of employers are saying, we're just trying to get the product out the door. We're, short staffed. We're trying to do what we need to do. And that is understandable. However, it's also very cost effective to do these trainings from a safety perspective, because you don't want to have someone get hurt and have a lawsuit come across your organization. That can be even more of a financial hardship. Another recommendation, as we talked about before, was consistent and timely communication with your employees. We're not asking you to hold an 8-hour meeting with them every day, but implement some of the ideas that we've talked about. Provide that timely communication and be a resource for them if they have questions. And you might not always have the answers, and that's okay. At least listen to them and then try to help navigate where they might go for further assistance. Next slide, please. So we do have some free resources that we've provided links here for you as you move forward, and if you have continued questions. The first one is your Job and Family Services, your unemployment office, Department of Labor, and the EEOC. We also have our internal COVID resource on our RAY website, and we also have the Ohio CDC listed here and CDC Gov. And there's also a more expansive list, as I mentioned, on our COVID website. And you can always reach out to me as well if you do have additional specific questions about a certain agency or where to go for certain questions. So we'd like to open it up for questions. We traditionally have a lot of questions, and we want to be sure we allow some time to talk through some of those if we have any.
Awesome. Thank you, Renee. So the first question we have here is, can an employee that resigned due to fear of catching the virus on the job still file for unemployment? Will we be expected to pay it as a county entity?
So in answer to the first part of the question, any employee is allowed to apply for unemployment. You as the employer can tell them, yes, you have that ability to do that. You're not making that decision. The unemployment office will not traditionally award unemployment if an employee is quitting just because they're scared of getting the virus. The employer has work available. They have made that known to the employee. If the employee resigns, then on their paperwork for the unemployment office, they're going to have to give the reason as to why they resigned. And that questionnaire will go back to the employer where you can say, we did have work available, and more than likely that would be denied then for them.
Awesome. The next question we have here is in regards to your slide about FLSA standards and state employers having to pay employees for all hours of telework actually performed. Does this apply to part-time employees?
It would apply to any employee, yes.
The next question we have here is working from home, any injuries? We're going to come back to that one. Do you have a list of HR documents and timelines for retention?
Yes, we do. And I am happy to upload that to our resource page, as it is pretty lengthy. There are a number of different things from the safety perspective, the employment perspective. So yes, I can upload that. It's a great question.
Next question we have here is regarding payroll tax deferral. Does the cap of $100,000 pertain to individual employee salary, or how they file their taxes? I believe that's what it's saying.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I would actually defer that to one of our tax experts here. That is not my forte, as I am HR, so I'm not going to be able to give any tax advice, but we can definitely put you in contact with a Ray individual here that could help answer that question for you.
Great. Next question we have here is an employee who elects online schooling for their child eligible for FFCRA? Let's say they had to choose between the hybrid model and full remote. So that's the next question.
Okay, that's a very good question, and that actually is one that they're currently looking at for the FFCRA leaves. And I expect that there will be additional guidance coming forward here in the next week or so. Where it stands right now is if the student is not physically at school and they're at the residence where the employee or the worker is, then that would qualify them for that leave because they are taking care of that child. Stay tuned for that though, because I do expect there's going to be further guidance on that, because that's not real clear in the criteria for leave.
Great. The next question we have here is, if the employee is over the age of 65 or has underlying health conditions in Ohio, are they still eligible for unemployment if they have fear of going back to work?
The unemployment process, there is no compensation for individuals not returning because of fear. There's nothing in the regulation that states that that is payable, no matter what the age is. Now, keep in mind, as we all know, the unemployment system has been very, very challenged, and a lot of cases and claims maybe have gotten through that shouldn't be through. But right now, those regulations state that, just because someone's afraid, that does not give them that ability to then qualify for that paid leave.
Great. The next question we have here is, if your employee has received 3 days of COVID pay through the FFCRA previously, are they eligible for any more in the future? If yes, how many? Are there restrictions or guidelines for split benefit periods?
That's a great question. And so yes, the FFCRA leave can be incremental, just as the family medical leave can be. So again, the max is a criteria of either 80 for the initial leave or up to the 10 weeks. There's a template that we have as well that we share with our clients that can show, here's the FFCRA criteria, here's the amount of pay based on that. So again, they can take that time, but there's only a certain amount of time that they can take based on the criteria.
Great. The next question we have here is, what is the importance of the electronic signature? I'm taking docs from health department requesting 2-week quarantine for FFCRA pay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Let me know.
Was the question, can they accept electronic signature? Is that what she was
I
asking?
am assuming that is the question.
Okay. From my understanding, yes. I mean, employers are able to take from doctor's offices, health departments. That electronic signature is just as good as that physical signature, for the fact that some employees might not be able to physically go to the office, or if they're teledocking, it's kind of that same situation.
The next question we have here is, if an employee wears a face shield, do they still have to wear a face mask?
That is a question I do not know the answer to, but I would refer you to the CDC website. I'm not sure if there's one or the other as far as that requirement. That is new to me, but go to the ohiocdc.gov, and that's on our website here or on our page. They can help you. And there's also a toll-free number that you can call for free and ask them that question as well.
Great. The next question we have here is there a date for the President's executive order for payroll tax deferral to start?
At this point, no. The Congress is talking this week, so I do expect that there'll be further information here as we move through the next couple days.
Awesome. The next question we have here is, can we ask for a doctor's note saying that an employee needs to take time off due to COVID-19 for FFCRA?
Yes, the employer does. Yes, the employer can require. It's not mandated, but if they have something that the employee can show, then yes.
The next question we have here is, if any hourly employee gets COVID, I'm assuming we pay them for the time they have scheduled during their quarantine time. Is that correct?
That is correct. The leave would pay them for whatever their normal work hours would be. If they're a part-time employee, it would be based on what their part-time schedule would be, for example.
The next question we have here is there a developed policy writing template available regarding FFCRA?
If you go to there are a number of templates out there that are chargeable for you, but if you look at our website, our COVID website, we actually have an FFCRA template, and I'm actually happy to share that as well if you'd like to reach out to me.
Awesome. And we do have your email as well, so we can I'll go ahead and mark that one.
Sure.
If an employee goes on vacation to a hotspot and must quarantine for 14 days when they return, do we have to pay their salary through the FFCRA since it's a government quarantine?
So that's a great question, a very common question as well. So the short answer to that is this is going to vary based on the state that you're in. So I'm going to speak specifically for Ohio. So right now there is a travel advisory. It's not a travel advisory mandate, but it states that if you travel to hotspot locations, it is recommended for you to self-quarantine for 14 days. Employers have the right to extend that same type of practice in their organization if they choose to. The key is they need to be consistent in how they're administering it. So it would be any employees traveling to those 10 or 11 states, as those continue to change, it has to be applied to all of the employees that would go to those locations. So if they are able to work remotely from home during that quarantine, then they should be paid as if they would normally be paid. If they are not able, if their work does not permit them to work remotely, say they're a factory worker or they have to be on a factory line, they would need to take if they have paid time off or sick time through your organization. I hope that answers that question. But there is nothing in the leave that pays them for that. If there was a mandate, if there was a government mandate by the state, then that would be a different scenario.
Great, thank you. And if you guys have any more questions, be sure to send them in. We're going to answer, or she's going to answer a few more after I ask them. So the next question I have here is, how does the payroll tax reduction affect employers?
And so thank you for that question. I would definitely defer that as well to one of our payroll tax experts here at the firm. We're happy to provide that contact for you as a resource.
Will employers not be required to match payroll taxes with the executive order? And if that's another question, just let me know.
Sure. And again, I definitely would refer that to our payroll tax department as well.
And then the last question we have here, if you guys have any more, be sure to send those in before we close it out. But it says, what happens when the employment office does not contact you for approval, but grant the unemployment anyway, or in some cases deny the unemployment, again without any contact to the employer?
Well, unfortunately, that's a very common occurrence. In a normal day and age when there's not a pandemic, the process itself was very antiquated in the fact that they would send a questionnaire to the employer and notify them that a claim has been filed. Given the vast amount of employment claims that have been administered and the lack of support at the offices from a staffing level, they've just been inundated with claims. So they're far behind, and some employers are seeing they get the determination of benefits awarded letter before they even knew anyone applied. They're really, at this point, I don't have an answer as to seeing that change. That's on the unemployment side. The biggest part from an employer perspective you can do is you should have an individual unemployment number for your organization. If you receive those determination of benefits and you feel maybe it should not be in place or should not have been awarded, you have the ability to request a conversation or request that be denied. And on that paper, it should provide you with that phone number and that information to do that. So even though the system might be backlogged and you're seeing things later, you still have that ability to go in and deny a claim. And then if they were to go through the process and then eventually approve your denial, then the repayments of that benefit would need to be done.
Great, thanks, Renee. And we have two more
Sure.
questions here. So if an employee comes to work sick and we tell them that they're not able to enter the building, are we required to pay them for the day?
If they are exhibiting signs of, if they have a temperature, or yes, you, the employer, have the ability to send them home, and they are eligible for time off if they are going to get a test, or if they are, it's a matter of them staying in contact with you to say, I'm going to go get tested, or my symptoms are gone. The CDC has guidelines in place for employers to say, there's a flow chart, and it can tell you that if an employee has a fever, there's certain steps that they should go through from a self-practice standpoint.
Great, and this question here says, how do I get the owners of my company to buy into the FFCRA? I have provided them with all the details showing that we do fall under the employer guidelines, and they still insist that they will not participate.
That's a good question, and all that we can say to that is these are untried times, and this is something that we've never seen in our lifetime. And these regulations are in place to help our employees and keep our employees safe. The ability to speak to a company and tell them that they need to do this, again, there's laws there, but it's also important from a safety perspective. So possibly reviewing with them from a safety issue that this is why we need to do this would be helpful.
Thanks, Renee. And I know I said that was the last question, but we have one more here that we're going to ask before we close out. And it says, if we follow the state's travel advisory and they go on vacation and we want them to quarantine, do we have to pay them for the quarantine time? Or do I tell them that they can't go on vacation to those states?
So that goes back to, that's a good question. That goes back to our original question. Right now, that's up to the employer. You can follow the CDC guidelines that state that if they're going to those hot spots, they need to self-quarantine for 14 days. That's where the remote work comes into play. If they're able to do their remote work from home, then they can be paid. There is no order by our governor that mandates that employees are eligible for the leave. So they're not eligible for leave if they go on vacation to Florida and come back and can't work remotely. Does that help clarify?
I think it does. And if you have any final thoughts?
Again, thank you, everyone. I know this is a lot of information. We try to touch base on the biggest topics. We understand you will have continued questions. Please feel free and reach out to myself. Please feel free and utilize the resource pages and links that we've provided. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Shifting the Business Infrastructure, HR Resources, and Hot Topics to Keep Your Organization Compliant. We hope that Renee was able to provide you with some valuable insight in regards to best practices and potential solutions. If you sign off today and realize that you have additional questions, you're always welcome to reach out to Renee directly. And thank you, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.